Welcome to the Guns and Gavel Show, where Arizona's self-defense and firearms attorney, Tim Forshey, weighs in on the delicate balance between the law and personal protection. Learn about the legalities and realities of self-defense as he dives deep to discuss firearms laws, legal use of force, concealed carry, and home defense training. The Guns and Gavel Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
I'd like to address one more thing. I know you got a limited amount of time here, but the one other thing I'd like you to address is talk to people about, I guess, part of our problem is a fatherless society where we don't have the fathers, and also the drugs that they're putting these kids on now. And almost every one of the shooters was on some sort of a psychiatric drug, and I think
that's I talk about that in my book, right? And that's a myth, Stephen. It's not true. When we talk about gun laws, I tell people how the gun laws working out in Mexico, how those gun laws working out in Mexico, and all of these mass murders in Mexico are not about psychotropic drugs. I think it's video game disinformation. Yeah. Of all these mass killers that I outline in this book, all these juvenile multiple homicides, only one were we even able to confirm was on a psychotropic drug. And so the idea that they're on these psychotropic drugs, we're talking here about a doc who says, when you're sick, you get penicillin and then you die. Did the penicillin cause the death? If you have problems in America, we put you on medications. And the medications don't work. Did the medication do it? And again, around the world, go to Wikipedia and look up worldwide homicide rates. Now click on the rate and click again to get the most violent nations on the planet. Yeah. And there's the most violent nation on the planet. We're usually about 80. Mexico's usually about 9 or 10. Virgin Islands, Jamaica, El Salvador, Honduras. What's happening in Honduras? What's happening in Jamaica? What's happening in Mexico? How are those gun laws working out in Mexico?
Right.
They trap us and it's a psychotropic drug. No, it's them. It's the media. It's them turning the killers into celebrities. It's them doing the killer simulators given to our children. It's them feeding the sick movies to our kids. Mike Rock in his book talks about how these killers watch a movie 50 times. All these killers have some movie that they watch 50 times. The Columbine killers watched the movie Natural Born Killers over 50 times. Yeah. Prior to the 1980s, it was not possible to watch a movie 50 times. Yeah. We all remember Betamax and VHS and The Big Battle. Well, you're aging yourself. You remember that? People don't understand. There was a time, if a movie wasn't in the theater, if it wasn't on TV, you couldn't watch it. Right. And today, we can watch it 50 times. And so the media desperately has to point the finger somewhere. Oh, it's the guns. It's the psychotropic drugs. Well, how the gun laws working out in Mexico? Yeah. And how those psychotropic drugs responsible for what's happening in Mexico. It's them. And,
let me ask you a question. I'll put you on the spot. So, because we all have our little armchair arguments about this. What can we do? I mean, what have we done in the last 30 years, in the last 40 years? What have we done? Well, let's ban assault weapons. Well, first of all, let's define assault weapon. And we get into that hole, go down that monkey hole. But we put bans on certain types of firearms. We ban magazines in excess of 10 rounds. We banned bayonet lugs. Thank God we banned the bayonet lugs from 94 to 04. Oh, yeah. What can we do, Colonel? What? And Stephen, obviously you too, you've got some ideas. What can we do as a country that could turn the corner on this and make it better?
Okay, and here's another factor, Tim. We're in the middle of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is the key factor in suicide. Teen suicides around the world have exploded, and the new factor is sleep deprivation. The best meta study on suicide says not only is sleep deprivation a key factor in suicide, it's the most remediable factor. Yeah. So we know that sleep deprivation is a key factor in traffic deaths and suicide, and there's a lot of data that would show one of the side effects of the video games, one of the side effects of watching a movie 50 times is sleep deprivation. The video games are designed to be addictive, impossible to turn off. And they want to steal your time. The head of Netflix said the number one competitor is not other online providers. the number one competitor is sleep. The corporate policy of Netflix is to steal your sleep. They don't care that it causes heart disease and obesity, and sleep deprivation is a key factor in Alzheimer's and dementia. Go online search, dementia and sleep deprivation, boom, come right up. They don't care that sleep deprivation is a key factor in suicide, and teen suicides have exploded worldwide. They just want to sell their product.
Wow.
And we got to understand there are things we can sell to adults that we cannot sell to kids.
Right.
All we did with tobacco was say, stop selling this stuff to children. Right. They fought all the way to the Supreme Court, sell any game to any kid at any age. So what we need first and foremost is education. But second, a national campaign on sleep and the necessities of sleep. I got a book coming out in 2 years called On Sleep, the tragic impact of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation. Wow. But here's one thing we can do. Kind of coming up top of the hour, I got to check out.
Sure, yeah.
That the head of the prime minister, remember the New Zealand mosque massacres?
Yes.
Again, how those New Zealand laws go in stopping that guy getting a gun? How those gun laws working out in Mexico? How's that working for them? But the prime minister of New Zealand said, this man did what he did to be famous, and we'll not give it to him. She said, New Zealand will never say his name.
I remember she said
New
that.
Zealand will never show his face.
So
she
what
said,
if we pass a law? What if we pass a law? Because and people say, you can't do that. It's a restriction on the First Amendment. And I'm always quick to point out, we've been doing that for 50 years with juvenile offenders.
Yes.
We don't publish the name or the identity of a juvenile offender now, and everybody seems to be just fine with that. Why can't we extend that to mass murderers as well?
Yeah.
That would cost the country nothing.
Mention their name one time, show us their picture one time, and after 48 hours, boom, never again.
Yep.
And there you would have, okay, we understand who that person is. We see the age and background. We understand what the name is. And then boom, they're nothing. They're nobody. It becomes illegal to even say my name.
Yeah.
In Canada, it's illegal to say the name of a juvenile offender. Right. And about every couple of years, a Canadian kid commits his crime, and they all find out, if I do this in Canada, I become nothing. I become nobody. It becomes against the law to even say my name.
I think we need that here.
Yes, we do.
Because people always, every time there's another horrific shooting, you see everybody that are doing this.
There's that word
talking about thoughts and prayers. Let's do something. And then they say, well, let's ban 11-round magazines. Well, why don't you just set your hair on fire and run into a wall? That's doing something. Let's do something that might work. I don't get it.
Amen.
So the last thing I want to ask you about before you go is that how do you feel about properly qualified, properly background checked people who pass the same qualifications as police officers as civilians being able to offer free, unpaid volunteer security in our nation's schools as a matter of federal law? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is so important.
Yeah.
And then I got to go ahead and check out and go see the dentist, right? But Ohio has a program called FASTER, Faculty and Staff Training for Emergency Response. 85% of all counties in Ohio have some armed educators. Mm-hmm. Now, they have to be nominated by their fellow educators. They have to qualify at the end of a week of training at the same level as a cop. But you don't walk in with that kind of skill. You got to go ahead with skills ahead of time. You got to arrive with skills. And then they've got some good training. So a reporter from the London Times came and took the training. He said, London Times, he said, I would have never thought I would say this after seeing the people taking the class, and now support armed educators. Wow. London Times. Buried on page 5.
I was going to say, why can't we see that on page 1? Yeah, my God.
Never repeat it again. Never repeat it again. You've got to understand, they have blood on their hands. They got to point the finger somewhere else. Yeah. We have never had, with 2 exceptions, we have never had a multiple homicide in a school when there was somebody in that building that could shoot back. Yeah. Now, the 2 exceptions were El Paso, Texas, and Oxford, Michigan, with cops on scene. And both cases, when the cops showed up, not another kid died. Yep. Now, Florida's got armed people, armed civilians in every school in Florida for all practical purposes. It's happened in 85% of all counties in Ohio. A judge said that's not enough training. They can't do that. They rammed through a law in the legislature to say, yes, that is enough training. How the media reported, Ohio lowers the standard to be armed in the schools. But they will tell you, I find out for yourself. I think a third of all schools in Texas have some armed educators in there. We have, and I think I can say this truthfully, we have never had a multiple homicide in a school with armed educators. If there was, we'd heard about it. Oh, there were armed educators.
Well, John Lott says the same thing. So I think your data is hard. Yes. I think that's correct. Yeah.
Yes. But so and it costs nothing. These educators, I had an elementary school principal tell me, I was doing a regional school safety conference, and very well received. I get standing ovation from educators on many occasions. They said, never seen educators give standing ovations in service, right?
Wow.
But I had, and this is after Sandy Hook, and the first one to die in Sandy Hook was an unarmed principal charging the killer. The second one to die was an unarmed school psychologist charging the killer. Women will die for their children. They will die. And this principal, she told me, she said, I will die for my kids tomorrow. Give me something besides my keys in my hand when that day comes. Now that makes hair stand on end. Yeah, we can do it. We're doing it. California had 2 school districts with armed educators, and California passed a law to make them stop doing that.
Yeah.
But in every other state across America, we're seeing more and more of it, and it works. We've got universal proof, as you will. John Lott's got the data. It's hard to prove a negative, but if there was armed educators that didn't work, we just sure as hell heard about it.
Well, we've got 45 years of data from
and they will not report it. Yes, and they just refuse to report it. You got to understand why. They have blood on their hands, and they got to point the finger somewhere else. The whole anti-gun thing is an active, persistent, intentional campaign to spread the guilt away from themselves. Right. And it's hollow, it's empty. Not only do they do harm to us, but then they turn around with their disinformation campaign and do even more harm. So you are on the side of the angels, my brother.
I was going to say, at the risk of sounding corny, guys, you guys are both doing God's work. You're 2 of my biggest heroes. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys taking an hour to talk with me. It means a lot. And Colonel, I feel terrible that you got to go from this horrible part of your day to go to the dentist. That's just terrible. But really appreciate you guys carving out time. Thank you so very much.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, please. Stay safe, folks, you guys, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.
Always an honor.
Hoorah.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of Guns and Gavels. Join us next time to learn more about the legal use of force, personal protection, and firearms training. Show your support and hit the like and subscribe buttons to make sure you never miss an episode. Till next time, stay safe.